Let's go see what kind of baseline we can get on this thing. So will this $47 generic 30 series driver beat up on my Juggernaut driver on this B200 mini bike with a modified 196? So which is better, this $47 generic 30 series driver or a Juggernaut driver? And then how do they compare internally? So I'll pull this generic driver apart and I'll pull a Juggernaut driver apart and we'll see if there's any difference. So I have the perfect bike to test these drivers on. So I have this B200 with a 196. It has a billet rod, a Bonsai 265 cam with 22-pound springs, a 14cc chambered head with mild port work, a cast flywheel with some added timing, and it has a Nibby 24mm carburetor and a header pipe. And then it's running a 40 rear sprocket. So I'll go ahead and pull the bell off of both of these drivers and we'll compare the two internally. And then I'll take the bike out for a 0 to 30 and top speed run with the Juggernaut first. We'll get a baseline on the bike and then I'll come back and swap on the generic driver and we'll see if there's any difference in performance. And then as always, I'll use my Draggy performance meter to measure the times so we get some really accurate times. So let's pull the Juggernaut off of here and we'll compare the two. So these things look almost identical, or pretty much identical from the outside. So there's your Juggernaut. Then there's your generic. So my Juggernaut, I mean, it has been used a little bit, so it's gonna look a little bit dirty compared to the generic. So it looks like it has the same marking there and there on the housing. So if you look at the rollers look very similar. I mean, these might be rounded off a little bit more, and I don't know the weight difference on each one. And the bolts look similar. Then your torsion springs look pretty much the same. I mean, they look the same. It's hard to tell spring rates and stuff like that. The torsion pins look similar, except these are silver on this, on the Juggernaut, and then they're darker on this, so I'm not really sure what they're made of. They're both magnetic though, so that's good. At least there's steel pins on both of them. If you look at the Spider, it looks very similar. It's magnetic on both. Yeah, the Spider on both of them look very similar. I mean, it's really hard to tell the difference. It looks like you could use a GPS tuner kit on the generic driver because the weights look very similar. Like I said, the bolts look the same. So inside the bell, they pretty much look identical. I mean, I really can't see a difference. And they're both magnetic. Let's pull this apart and see. They look the same. I mean, like I said, my Juggernaut's used. It's got some miles on it. It looks very, very similar. Yeah, I mean, even the angle on these look pretty much identical. So it looks like it'd be interchangeable. Let's see if the generic setup will go on the Juggernaut. Yeah, slides on the generic, slides on the Juggernaut, no problem. So even the welds on the housings look the same. I mean, really similar. Yeah, so visually, I don't know if there's really much of a difference. So I guess I'll throw these back together and then we'll run them on the bike. I used some PB Blaster dry graphite lubricant on the moving parts before I threw these back together. So these things look pretty much the same visually anyway. It's really hard to tell. I mean, this is a really good copy. I mean, like I said, the weights might be a little bit different shape, so therefore the weight might be slightly different, maybe. And then the color of the pivot pins, but the Spider and the springs and everything else are all made out of metal, so that's one good sign. So I'll go ahead and throw a Juggernaut on here first, and I'll take the bike out for a 0 to 30 and top speed. We'll get a baseline on the bike, and then I'll throw this generic version on there, and we'll see if there's any difference. I mean, so far, it doesn't seem like there's much of a difference, but we'll find out. And then another thing with the generic, I really can't test for longevity, at least right now. I mean, I've had my Juggernaut forever, and that thing's held up really well, but at least we can test for performance. Let's go see what kind of baseline we can get on this thing. This thing is pretty snappy with that 40 sprocket. You would think it'd be slower or not as quick. But it's pretty darn quick, even with the 40. All right, let me set this draggy up here. See if I can get some satellites. First 0 to 30 with Juggernaut driver on the 196. Man, that thing's pretty quick for a 196. So we did a 3.72 for the first 0 to 30. Let me see if I can back that up real quick. So let me see if I can beat up on that. 3.72 for a second attempt. Man, this thing is really consistent. 3.78. So a 3.72 and a 3.78. So we're really consistent with this. So now I'll go and get a top speed. So I'll start out about right here in the same spot, and I'll run down to the bottom of the street and we'll see what kind of speed we get. I mean, it won't be the true top speed, but it'll be consistent for both drivers. Okay, top speed run with the Juggernaut driver. Okay, so 54.51. And I'll shut it down in the same spot next time around. So I got some baseline numbers. What was it? 3.72 0 to 30 and 3.78. So it's really consistent. It's actually pretty quick for having a 40 sprocket on here with a 196. So it's pretty decent. And then I got a top speed, not a true top speed, but I can be consistent with the top speed because I'll start at the same spot and shut it down in the same spot. But I think it was 54.51 top speed. So anyway, I'll swap out the Juggernaut driver for the generic driver, and I'll go back and do the same test, and we'll see what happens. All right, there's the jug. Kind of goes on there hard. There we go. So my Juggernaut, as I said before, has some miles on it. So I think I'll drive this bike around just a little bit and kind of wear this driver in. And what's cool about this bike, it's street legal, so I can cruise it around without getting busted. So let's go see what we can get. Maybe we'll get identical times.
Like I said, the weights could be different in there, and the spring rates, so kind of hard to tell. Cruise around the neighborhood just to kind of break this thing in. It sure sounds different. It kind of chatters, actually. You hear that? I don't know if you can hear that on camera. The Juggernaut feels a lot smoother. Kind of weird. Yeah, it has that weird chatter right there. Chatter to it. That is weird. I don't know if you can hear that on camera, but it's definitely not as smooth as the Juggernaut. So let me see if I can get a 3.72 0 to 30. A 4.22. Wow, that's a lot slower. Let me back that up. Let me see if I can better that takeoff a little bit. Seemed like it hesitated just a little bit. Just want to make everything even. So the first one, a 4.22, definitely not as quick as the Juggernaut so far anyway. Let's see. Okay, second attempt, generic driver versus the Juggernaut, 0 to 30. Okay, a 4.20. So it's a lot slower from 0 to 30. It's consistently slower though, at least 4.22 and 4.20. So definitely slower than the Juggernaut. Juggernaut's definitely quicker from 0 to 30. And it has a little bit of a chatter to it. It's kind of weird. Like right there. Then it smooths out after you get going. Okay, let me see if I can beat up on 54.51 top speed. What's cool about this test, the weather is exactly the same because it's only about 10 minutes apart from the last test. Okay, so it's even slower at top speed. It did 53.52. And I let off in the exact same spot. Let me do another 0 to 30 real quick, just to make sure. But I think the Juggernaut is quicker and faster than the generic driver. All right, 30 temp, 0 to 30, generic driver. Yep, this thing is consistently slower than the Juggernaut. 4.27, so we're always in the 4s. I mean, that's quite a bit slower, actually.
So the Juggernaut is definitely a lot quicker and faster than the generic driver, at least on this bike anyway. 0 to 30 with the Juggernaut, 3.72, and then a 3.78, so it's really consistent. Did 54.41 down to the bottom of the street. And I put the generic driver on there. We did a 4.22, a 4.20, and a 4.27. So the Juggernaut is a lot quicker than the generic driver. I mean, about a half a second quicker. And then slower top speed, 53.52. So these drivers might look the same, but the Juggernaut is definitely a lot quicker and faster than the generic driver. So this thing was about a half a second quicker on the bike, which is a lot quicker. And then the top speed, you could tell that the generic driver wouldn't let the engine rev past a certain point. It only did 53 miles an hour. And once it got up to that point, it didn't feel like it wanted to rev anymore. So however they got that thing set up, it just does not let it rev like the Juggernaut does. So I'm thinking maybe it's just the weight of the weights on here, and then maybe the spring rates that are different or slightly different that make the difference, but I'm not sure. So maybe at some point I'll swap around the springs and the weights on this generic driver to see what happens. So the Juggernaut will definitely outperform the generic driver all the way around. And another thing with the generic driver, which was kind of weird, it has this vibration at mid RPM. I mean, the mid RPM range, it has like a, I don't know, it vibrates, but then it smooths out after that. So I don't know what the issue is with that. I mean, maybe that could be tuned out of it, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just a driver that I got. But yeah, the Juggernaut definitely engages a lot smoother through the RPM band. I would say overall, the generic driver feels better than the stock driver. I mean, it engages a little bit smoother than a stock driver, but the Juggernaut definitely outperforms it all the way around. I mean, for my money, it's definitely worth an extra 30 bucks just to grab a Juggernaut.